In this video, I'm going to cover the Paladin Oath of Devotion, providing a brief description of the class, explain the tenets, as well as show and help set up various features gained through this particular oath. The paladins of this oath usually hold themselves to very high standards and can easily become discouraged if they are unable to maintain that level of discipline they attain to reach. This can lead to a crisis of faith and provides ample role-playing aspects to keep the character interesting, even potentially adding a party dynamic that provides interesting player-to-player interactions. They typically rush into battle with little to no fear, but are wise enough to know when they are outmatched, and will usually be the last off the field if they have the means to be able to control that. However, most people see them as stuffy zealots because of the standards they set for themselves, and because they will typically judge others to those same standards. At the same time, however, those people will still call out to these warriors in times of need, hoping to be saved from whatever doom has befallen them. This class specialization can be chosen at level 3 and will either complete or initiate a holy quest, depending on the DM. In my case, I will typically link a Paladin's holy quest into the main campaign story at around this part of the character's level, simply because it can sometimes be easier to do that, and it doesn't really break the flow of the campaign, which would potentially introduce some boredom for the other party members. But enough about that, let's go into the tenets. So Paladin of Devotion, as I like to call them, has a number of tenets that they should abide by. And really, this is their guiding post, if you will, when it comes to how this particular character should be played. And you'll see that that is a common theme when it comes to the various paladins that we go over. In this particular case, however, honesty, courage, compassion, honor, and duty are the tenets that any paladin who follows this particular class specialization will abide by. Not one of them, but all of them. And it's these tenets that will guide me, the Dungeon Master, as to whether your character is sticking by the values that they have obtained throughout their quote-unquote background, and in general, what has given them this particular choice of a class specialization, or whether I should be looking at shifting your alignment and changing your subclass to the Oathbreaker. It all comes down to how well you play your character in relation to these tenets. And as you can see, these tenets come into play primarily at around level 3, but you really should have already been running your character with these guideposts, which is why it's a good idea to look ahead to really get a good idea as to which oath you do plan on taking in advance. But at level 3, you will also gain 2 other features. The first is additional spells. In this case, you will gain spells that are specific to devotion, and you'll probably recognize that they're fairly clerical in their nature, if you will. None really around healing, but in general, you will find that these are spells a typical cleric would have. And that's where these spells come from. And because of this level of devotion that your paladin is giving to the particular oath that you're taking, or the religious order that you're working with, or whatever order you happen to be working with, you will gain these particular spells as part of that process. You will gain access to these spells when you hit level 3, as well as at 5th level, 9th level, 13th level, and 17th level. However, it doesn't mean that you have the ability to cast them and add them to your group of spells that you have right off. What this means is that you can choose these spells, or you can choose some of the other ones that are provided by the actual Paladin base listing of spells, not that you're adding these spells to your actual grouping of spells, if you will. So let's say, for example, with this particular character, I had already taken, well, actually, here it is right here. I've already taken Cure Wounds and Thunderous Smite. I would not drag these 2 spells over and provide them there. That's not what that means. What this means is that I could choose to take one of these spells and swap it for one of these spells. Or when I hit 5th level and have gained or unlocked additional spells, or even at 4th level, if I decided to make a modification to my charisma modifier here with the ability adjustment score, and increase this to another +1, at that point, I could choose one of these spells and add it to the list. For these particular spells, I would now have to be 5th level in order to be able to gain access to them. That's how this works. But when you're 5th level and you're going through and choosing your spells for what you gained at 5th level, you could choose these two, or you could choose the ones that are in the Paladin's listing. That's what it means. The other feature that you gain at this particular level is Channel Divinity, and it works almost like the clerical ability. You do have the ability to turn undead, essentially is what that comes down to, but you also gain something called a Sacred Weapon. And we're going to take a look at this here in a second. So I'm first going to go over the Turn the Unholy portion of this particular Channel Divinity feature. Essentially, it functions the exact same way that the clerical Turn Undead does, in the sense that you raise your holy symbol, you channel your divine powers, if you will, and then whatever creatures are in the area that are going to be affected by this, or whoever you selected, will have to make a wisdom saving throw. If they fail that wisdom saving throw, they then have to try to find a way to get as far away from you as possible. Now, while they can't necessarily use any other action except a dash or a dodge, if something happens to be in the way, they're going to bowl it over. So there might be not necessarily an attack per se, but if you've got someone else blocking the way, they're going to try to run right through you, which means they might try to do a push or a shove or try to push you over the edge to get you out of the way. Their only thought is to get away from whatever the heck just cast this brilliant, divine beacon of something at them. And that's really what it comes down to. Now, because of that, this means this feature should be added to the actions page. But before we do that, we'll cover the other aspect of this, and that's the Sacred Weapon. What you get with this is the ability to use an action, and you can imbue one of your weapons that you're actively using or holding so that it has really nothing. It's full of positive energy, is what it comes down to. And for up to 60 seconds, you will be able to add your charisma modifier to the attack rolls made with that particular weapon. Not to the damage rolls, just to the attack rolls. The weapon also emits bright light within a 30-foot radius and dim light for 20 feet beyond that. So for 60 seconds, you're a shining beacon to whatever is around you, essentially is what that means. And if it is already a non-magical weapon, it will become magical for the duration of that particular turn or 60-second period. So any attack you make will have a magical aspect to it rather than just your slashing or your piercing or your bludgeoning, whatever it happens to be. You can choose to end this effect on any part of any other action. So you could be running away and choose to remove that particular effect, or you could be making an attack and after your attack choose that, okay, I don't need it anymore. And that's it. That's what it is. But this is something that does make an adjustment to things. So we're probably going to want to look at adding it to the actions page, even if it wasn't for this side of it. So how do you go about setting this up? Well, it's actually relatively easy. Just drag and drop it into your actions tab, much like we've done in the past. I'm going to create an Oath of Devotion grouping, like that. And for the most part, we're done. We have to fix up the saving throw a little bit here. That's fine. We can do that here in a moment. I'm not entirely certain why there's this unconscious effect here. I think it picks up the unconscious wording in here, and as a result has added that. But we also have the turned effect here. So that part is already done for us. Essentially, Turn Unholy is ready. The part that we still have to set up is the Sacred Weapon portion of this. And I'm just going to delete that. So let me delete this particular action. So that clears that out of there. Now I'm going to set up and fix up this saving throw first. I'm going to do this by using the group here. And our ability is Charisma. And when we set this, you'll notice that this automatically saved to DC of 11. That's because that's what this particular change puts it and sets it up for. So our Charisma is the saving throw setup, if you will, when it comes to saving throws that we're going to require other creatures or people to make. So by setting this to Charisma, we've already set up the default configuration that we need to add here. Okay, so what about the attack? Well, what we need to do is create a new effect. So we can add a new effect, and I'm going to tell the Dungeon Master what this is. Channel Divinity. Divinity of Devotion. Semicolon. ATK, colon, and then in square brackets, capital CHA, close square bracket. This is going to last for 1 minute, and it's going to be on yourself. In theory, what this should do is set things up so that when you actually roll an attack, when Channel Divinity is active, you will be able to add your charisma to the attack bonus on top of your existing attack bonuses. So let's see if that actually works. So let me go ahead here and quickly set up the combat tracker in the Dungeon Master side of things here. All right, so the Paladin. Taking a second to load here. There we go. All right, so I have the Paladin in the combat tracker. I've set it up so that the Paladin has the turn, if you will. And I'm going to attack this succubus. So I'm going to control, left click on that particular target or creature. I'm then going to roll one-handed. Now, we already see that there's a +6 bonus here, and we see that the +6 is here. I just wanted to roll that without actually applying the effect first so that we could see the difference. Now, if I apply the effect, we should see that I should see a +1 bonus, so we should see a +7 total bonus here. That's my hope. So now let's see what happens. If I roll the attack, I'm now seeing +7, and that will last for 1 minute, and it will go away after that 1 minute period. Excellent. This is working the way that I wanted it to. There is something that I would like to point out here at this particular point in time. If you read through this description carefully, you will notice that there is no requirement for a rest. That's what makes Channel Divinity for a Paladin different from a Cleric. With a Cleric, you get a limited number of uses. With a Paladin, you get to use it almost as often as you want. There is not a limitation to it except for the fact of when the effect would go away or what would happen if it happens to fail. That's it. But with that, we have now set everything up that we needed to for all of the features we gained at level 3. So I'm going to continue on moving to our next feature, which we will gain at level 7. So at level 7, we acquire the Aura of Devotion feature. And what this feature gives you is essentially the ability to resist charm effects for you and anyone else within 10 feet of you up until level 18, when that spacing, if you will, grows up to 30 feet around you. So you now have the ability to essentially provide a level of immunity to those who are charmed. That's where this comes into play. This does mean, though, that it is an effect that you're going to want to add to the Actions tab here. And because it comes from your Oath, you're going to want to throw it into the same group as the Channel Divinity ability that we got earlier. Oath of Devotion. The one thing you will notice, though, is it does not have the resistance or immunity, if you will, to the charm effect anywhere within this particular feature. Charm is one of those things that we should be able to set up here. So I'm going to simply add an effect, edit that effect, call it Aura of Devotion, semicolon, immune, charmed. And it is self, and it has no expiration, except you'll want to be cognizant of anyone who happens to move further than 10 feet out from you. Or at later levels, 30 feet from you if you happen to make it to level 18. And as a result, you'll want to have the ability to remove that, or remember to remove that from anyone who happens to pass out of that particular reach. Well, what happens if you happen to move into someone's particular reach? So in other words, you've now moved from 15 feet away from somebody to 10 feet away from somebody. and your Aura of Devotion comes into effect, yes, it will break the charm. There's no saving throw required. All of a sudden, that particular individual will just kind of, what? Wait a minute. Oh, yeah. And start to react. So that's how this comes into play. Sadly, however, that is the only feature that we will be gaining related to our Oath of Devotion at level 7. So with that, I will move on to Purity of Spirit. You will not acquire Purity of Spirit until you hit level 15. But when you do hit level 15, you will essentially gain a permanent version of the Protection from Evil and Good spell. Unfortunately, you have to go 8 levels before you can get to this from level 7, which is where you acquired Aura of Devotion. So it's quite a bit of a range in levels there. This does mean that this should be added to your Actions tab. And once again, it will be under the Oath of Devotion grouping. Devotion. I hate how that highlights if you just leave it there. Oath of Devotion. All right, so that'll go into this particular group. Now, rather than actually go through and try to manually recreate the effects of what Purity of Spirit is going to give us through the Protection from Evil and Good, my suggestion to you is simply open up the Spells tab, look for the keyword Protect, and open up the actual spell itself. Then temporarily drag and drop that into the actual Actions tab so that you can get access to the effect here. And then just simply copy and paste this. So Control C that. Now, go back up to Purity of Spirit, add a new effect, and modify that effect, and put this in there. And this is Purity of Spirit, semicolon, and then the rest of the actual thing. But there's one key factor here. You can get rid of that concentration thing. You don't have to concentrate in order to maintain this. You are always under the effects of this protection. You don't need to focus on it, which means it's on you, and it never expires. Now, when you dropped into the combat tracker, you essentially just click this effect, and it will always be there as long as you're not removed from the combat tracker. And that's all this comes down to for setting it up and configuring it. You don't have to do anything else. So that's going to bring us to our last feature that we are going to gain. And sadly, we are going to gain that at level 20, or positively, depending on whether you had a character get to level 20. So as you can see here, I'm just dragging and dropping the level into place. Holy Nimbus is going to be the feature that we're going to acquire here. And Holy Nimbus gives you essentially a bright beacon that you can use to harm other creatures in the area and give yourself a bit of an advantage if those creatures happen to be fiends or the undead, specifically on saving throws. So this is definitely something you're going to want to add to your Actions tab. I'm going to drag and drop that into place. It already has the damage configured, and this is Oath of Devotion. That works better when you capitalize everything the same. There we go. Just remove that group. And I'm going to minimize everything else so that we can just focus on this. Now, Holy Nimbus will last for 1 minute. What it does is you will essentially create a beacon of light, of bright light, essentially, 30 feet out from you, and then dimmer light an additional 30 feet beyond that, for a total of 60 feet around you. Anything that is within that 30-foot section of light from you can suffer 10 points of radiant damage if they happen to start their turn within that bright portion of the light. Not if they're in the dim side, but if they're within 30 feet of you. Additionally, you will gain advantage on saving throws against spells cast by fiends or the undead. Once you use this feature, however, you have to complete a long rest to be able to use it again. So, The radiant damage is already configured, but we need to be able to give ourselves the advantage factor when it comes to our saving throws. So that means that we need to add a new effect. We do that by adding an effect. I'm going to call this Holy Nimbus. It will last for 1 minute, and it will be on you. And what you're going to be giving yourself is an advantage to saving throws, ADV, SAV. That's it. But you can adjust this potentially, although it's really 50-50 as to whether this works. So if you take a look at our Purity of Spirit ability here, if the target is this, grant this. So that's kind of what we want to do here. In this case, we want to restrict the type to fiends or the undead. So IFT type bracket, and that is fiend, undead, close bracket, and I believe it is a semicolon to finish that off. And what that will do, as long as you have the creature targeted when they cast that spell, this will come into effect. That's all it comes down to. But having said that, I also believe that if they are an actor who's throwing a particular spell on you that's triggering your saving throw, I do believe the if type check also applies. Before we finish with Holy Nimbus, however, we have to be able to set up the rest requirement. So as you see here, once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. Well, that's just a matter of making sure that we click on the preparation tab here and making sure we have a 1 in this field here. And now we can see that we get a single use, and then when it gets used, it goes away until the Dungeon Master executes a long rest. So let's do that now. Long rest, and as you can see, it returns. Well, with that, we should have everything set up that we need for this particular character. As a result, that brings us to the end of this particular video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to ask them in the comments below, or place them in the comments below. And I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.